dialogue between the host and the listeners about their relationships. This show is not an attempt to assess, diagnose, or treat any mental health or illness condition. Please consult your physician, psychiatrist, or psychotherapist for personal matters.
Inner Voice, a heartfelt chat with Dr. Foojan.
Hello, everyone. Welcome to the Inner Voice Show. I'm Dr. Foojan Zain, and I'm a psychotherapist and an author and the originator of the Awareness Integration Theory. And hello to Sean, our director in our studio. This is a show about what matters most in our life: our minds, our thoughts, feelings, actions, relationships, and our fulfillment in this beautiful journey of life. Today, I will share the tip of the week about spring cleaning your mind. Yes, it's spring. That's what we got to do first. I will chat with Dr. Toby Travis, the founder of the Trust Ed. We will be talking about his latest book, Trust Ed, The Bridge to School Improvement. And then I will chat with Suzanne Falter. She's a podcast host and the author of the extremely busy Women's Guide to Self-Care. Her essays have appeared in Self, the New York Times, as well as O. Please subscribe to my YouTube channel and podcast and connect with me through any of the social medias: Instagram, Twitter, LinkedIn, Facebook, all of it. I love to hear from you. But first, here's the tip of the week. Hello, this is Dr. Foojan Zain, and this is the tip of the week. Spring cleaning for the mind, right? Here it is. The spring is here, and the best thing we could ever do is to clear our mind. It is time to let go of what does not work and take on new workable habits. Airing out your internal thought and emotions helps you declutter. This reorganization and purging can open room for new healthy thoughts, emotions that would lead to healthy behaviors and the creation of healthy outcomes. Start with breaking bad habits. Identify the habits that don't work for you anymore. Maybe it's eating not right, exercising or not exercising, smoking, alcohol, getting overly angry, not being able to handle your emotions, any of those, or anything that you could imagine, which you know is not working for you. Tackle one habit at a time. Yes, we all have a lot more unhealthy habits that we can imagine, but let's do it, identify it, list it, and let's take one at a time. Prioritize the ones that you don't want to do. Observe and identify any triggers, your triggers, and how to eliminate them from your surroundings, the ones that creates the bad habits. For example, if you think you drink too much, then look at what triggers you. Is it the parties you're around? Is it the alcohol that's around? Whatever you think that would be the trigger. Formulate what you like to replace it with and be clear about the goal and make it measurable. Set a date to start with a new way of operating instead of the old habits. Journaling, it's wonderful because you get to be aware, you could go back, you could look at it, it releases all of it is wonderful. So begin journaling. And then every evening as you write, take a blue pen and circle all the negative thoughts and emotions. Now take another pen, maybe a green pen, and circle all the positive thoughts and emotions that you've already written. And then begin cultivating a positive thought about each of the negative ones. If you felt like a victim in any situation, begin to see your power in what you have done and you have handled it. See what you have learned and how you have become resilient. Be aware of the stories that you attach to people and different experiences versus the facts that are there. See the facts, identify which one of them are facts. Like if I took 10 other people there, they would see the same thing. And what part of it is your perception your stories that you've assigned to it. Give yourself a limited time to vent your emotion. Don't create an emotional uproar. If the emotion comes in, just see what the message is, vent it off, and be done with it versus constantly cultivating it. And pamper and nurture yourself because you deserve it. Now, declutter your physical space. Start with one location or a closet at a time. Decluttering makes your anxiety go down, and it just because visually it's so pleasing to the eye, calms you down. Create a measurement rule for yourself. For example, if you have not used an item for 1 year or so, get rid of it. Ask yourself, is this item really useful? When was the last time that I used it? Does it have emotional value? So it's not useful, but it's useful to me because it reminds me of such and such a time, which I had an amazing time and I want to cherish it. Can that emotional value be assigned to something else? Or do you have to have all of these things that you have memory about? Could you have one item that represents all of those memories for you? How does keeping it make you feel? Does it make you feel like, oh my God, I really, really want to have this because I feel safe and I feel pleasure? Or if it's not there and I haven't seen it because it's in the closet, so it's not really in my life. It's just once in a while, if I ever go to the closet, I know that that's there. So if it's a feeling of security and I want something, why is it in the closet then? And if it's in the closet, maybe it no longer holds that value that needs to be there immediately. How does letting it go make me feel, right? So how does having it make me feel? How does letting it go make me feel? Can I replace it if I change my mind? And get help from a friend who is not attached to the items. And it makes it easier because every time you're like, no, oh my God, I can't let it go. A friend is like, come on, please. You haven't touched this for 3 years. It's been in a box in an attic. Let it go. And then give away one item at a time to a friend or a charity. So this might help. The next one, notice your relationships. What behaviors in your relationship do you choose to change? The behavior in an intimate relationship you're committing to change. And maybe, just constantly complaining, constantly being angry. Maybe those are the things you want to change in your relationship. The behavior or people in your friendship you're committing to change. The behavior or people in your career or job you're committing to change. The behavior in your finances you're committing to change. And the behavior in the way you treat yourself that you're committing to change. So write them all down. And then next, generate gratitude by making a list of things that you're grateful for, even if it appears small. Begin each day by being grateful for all that is in front of you during the day. Each night, journal about all the great opportunities for working, learning, and relating you had all day. Appreciate your body, your character, and the people in your life. Allow the gift of forgiveness for yourself and people around you. Choose the person you commit to being with noticing your values and align your thoughts, emotions, and behaviors with your values. Create defined goals and set up your action plans in your calendar. Set up structures with people around you to inspire and support you to reach your goal. So spring is here. Welcome it with every aspect of your being and a newness, and wishing you an amazing, amazing, amazing new year and new spring. Excited to have Dr. Toby Travis with me. He is the founder of Trust Ed, a framework for school improvement focused on developing trusted leaders. The application of his research serves as the basis for the Trust Ed School Leader 360 assessment, which schools worldwide utilize to inform school improvement initiatives. In addition, he's an executive consultant with the Global School Consulting Group, an adjunct professor for the International Graduate Program of Educators in the State University of New York, College at Buffalo, and an experienced teacher and administrator of public school for 12 schools. And his new book that we're going to be talking about is Trust at the Bridge to School Improvement. Welcome to the show.
Thank you so much. Very happy to be here.
Same here. I'm excited to have you with us. You have actually done an amazing research at school. So I wanted to first ask you about your research and your findings.
Well, yeah, years of research boils down to really one major fact, and that is that the number one indicator of school success is trusted leadership. And what's interesting about what we discovered in the research is it doesn't seem to matter how we measure or define success, rather. So if your definition of success is student achievement levels, yes, the number one indicator is trusted leadership. If the measurement of success is teacher retention rates, yeah, number one indicator, trusted leaders. If it's community involvement or support or volunteerism, and the list really goes on and on. We just found over and over again that the number one indicator for successful schools, and this also applies over in the corporate world as well, it's all about the leadership. You know, Maxwell is famous for saying it all rises and falls in leadership. Well, he's absolutely right, and the research bears it out. And if we don't get that right, everything falls apart. And so basically my call and work has been, let's make sure we are focused on what we need to focus on first as a foundation to everything we do, and that is ensuring there are high levels of trust in those that lead our organizations, our communities, our schools, and yeah, that's been my passion and work for the last dozen years or so.
Dr. Travis, define trust in this perspective for us, because obviously when we think about trust, each person really have their own experience at it. You know, in relationships, we have a different types of a trust. And does trust hold a sense of accountability to the roles that we have? Is it like, you know, is it that we have expectations and that needs to be fulfilled? Is it that, you know, is the expectation some things that we have from before and come to whether it's a company or a school system or any of it, or is it supposed to get created because we have an agreement together where this setting requires these type of services, and then if you tell me you're going to give me those services, then you need to create it so I can trust it. Can you define, when you were doing research on trust, what were you calling trust?
Yeah, and of course the answer is yes, 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 yes. The complexity of trust, and that's why this has taken years to kind of get our arms around. In fact, one of the exercises I'll do when I'm doing a live training is we use a word cloud, and everybody pulls out their phone, and I'll say, okay, put in, I say the word trust you think of, and they'll put it in 1 to 3 words, and you see this word cloud form of all these, and I use it for that very purpose of emphasizing and illustrating this is complex. We use one small short word to mean a lot of things. So very quickly, and what the book bears out is, in order to get our arms around a very complex concept, we've identified 6 major components to trusted leadership. And using the framework of a bridge analogy to help us understand it. So there are foundational elements, just like a bridge has got to have a foundation. In leadership, there we're talking about beliefs and values. A bridge has a deck, you know, the part we drive across. Well, that's all about order and clarity, and on and on. So we've discovered, again, there are 6 major components. And even within those components, one of them we identify as the girders of the bridge, which really is all about contextualization and adapting. And what that means is trust looks different in different settings and in different relationships. So it's not as clean and as easy as, you know, this is it and it's always this way. No, the reality is we've got to contextualize, we've got to adapt, we've got to look at, okay, what is the setting, the surrounding, the relationships, but there are very specific components, competencies, skill sets that largely can be assessed, they can be developed. And when we see those skill sets and competencies in place, yeah, those people tend to be trusted as a general rule. So there are, again, ways to assess, measure, intentionally develop. And that's the encouraging part about it, that it's not just some mysterious set of soft skills. There are very specific skill sets to be developed.
So for example, as you were doing this research in the school settings, what is the element of trust in that setting that is needed for example, leaders to create the setting, and then for the leaders to be able to trust the teachers and the environment they're creating for the students, for the teachers to be able to trust the leaders and that are there for them, to support them, to create this for the students to trust the teachers and the leaders, and for the parents to do all of this. What were some of the findings that you got out of the research?
Well, let me share as an example of the area that we see where trust is most frequently broken. And I think that will illustrate right to the point that you're asking. So as I mentioned just a moment ago, there needs to be a foundation to trust. And here what we're looking at are articulated values and beliefs. So in a school setting, what do we believe about education, or what quality education looks like? What do we believe about the role of the parent, the student, the teacher? And what are our shared values within that specific school, right? So we articulate all these things, we make sure that they are known and identified. So that's the foundation. Well, a bridge also has a substructure. The function of a bridge's substructure is to connect and support everything in the bridge to its foundation. Well, in leadership, that substructure is ensuring we're connecting and supporting everything we're doing as a school to what we say we believe. And where trust falls apart is, let's say as an administrator, I say, no, teachers are our highest value. Right? Teachers are the essence of education. They are the essence of our school. It's not our technology. It's not our building. It's not even our curriculum. It is our teachers. I say that's our highest value. But then if my practice is not prioritizing budget, resources, operations of the school around meeting the needs of teachers as my highest priority, I'm not going to be trusted. And that's where it falls apart, when we're not carrying through consistently in our practice what we say we believe.
So, for example, if you're going around the United States and looking at the schools that worked, the trust level worked, the student achievement worked, and if the teachers felt like success, what type of fundamental values had to be there so that you could found a really strong foundation to build what you say the bridge on?
Well, again, there's many elements to that, but I'll give you a couple of examples. One is the healthiest schools where we see this taking place, there are the greatest amounts of teacher autonomy as possible. In other words, hire professionals and treat them as professionals. So we reduce the micromanagement. And even though, yes, there's been lots of calls for accountability, and that's understood because it's either tuition dollars or tax dollars, yes, and yet let's hire people we trust and that are competent to do the job, and then let them do it. And treat them as professionals. So, that sense of teacher autonomy, that's a real win. And what we have found, so take it this way, when do we see students having the highest levels of achievement? When students are engaged and self-motivated. What's the number one factor for student motivation and engagement? Teacher trusted relationship. So then we have to look at what gets the teacher involved and motivated. What's the number one indicator or number one factor? Trusted leadership. It all comes back to, so if teachers are feeling well supported, they are empowered, they're trusted by their leaders, well, then they're more likely to replicate that with their students, and we see higher levels of engagement. So this idea of hire well, support well, which is getting more and more challenging as we're in the midst of a national teacher shortage. Actually, we've been in a shortage for years. This employment crisis has just exacerbated it and made it very, very public to everyone. And then, support them as professionals. That's a key element.
Well, one of the things that I've noticed working with a lot of families, and and the children, is that everybody was exhausted even before the COVID. And then after COVID, everybody just burnt out. And you could see that coming across. You could see it from the leaders to, the teachers. They didn't feel supported in many layers. And then that also crossed over to the kids, where sometimes you experience the children hours, like we talk about life balance. And then suddenly I work with a lot of teenagers, which they truly have to study almost 14 to 16 hours a day. Like not only they're going to school, the amount of homework, everything they have to do. And then we're wondering how come the anxiety level and depression level are sky high. And our teenagers are getting panic attacks and have to be on pills now. But I work with these teens where they actually have to work almost 4 to 5 hours every evening, regardless of the amount of hours that they were either on Zoom during the COVID or they were. So you saw this kind of a tiredness and then burnout in the whole system. Is this also part of the losing trust that somehow the system isn't working? If their health is being jeopardized, then it's almost like love of learning goes away, and school is a place for love of learning, right?
Right, sure. I mean, where you see the highest levels of trust, you also see the highest levels of self-fulfillment, of actually enjoyment of the job or of the classroom. And right, you have to be very, very sensitive to the capacity of teachers to be successful, the capacity of students to be successful. We talk a lot about just being in tune with the river that's flowing. Again, with the bridge analogy, okay, what is that river that's flowing that we've got to get everybody across? And that basically just means situational awareness, that we have situational awareness to our teachers' needs, our parents' needs, our students' needs. And that's been very difficult for many, many folks to navigate through the pandemic. We've been trying to look for solutions, and we've all had to develop greater skill sets in what we're doing right now, right, via Zoom and other platforms. And yet, all of this creates, as you said, kind of a sense of weariness. You get tired of constantly doing this. And back to how do you develop trust in the midst of that is anytime we place a new expectation on students, or as an administrator places a new expectation on teachers, then you have to look at, okay, what are we taking off the plate? Before we add another responsibility. I mean, here was what happened, years ago when the No Child Left Behind movement came out. Again, well-intended. I don't mean to beat up the politicians who, and we can debate, all kinds of things around that. But let's just assume, okay, it was well-intended. The problem was there was not a deep enough conversation. Okay, what are we going to take off teachers' plate in order to do even just the paperwork involved in this new initiative? And here's frequently the problem that we find, not just in school improvement, but all kinds of organizational improvements. When we look at, we want to adopt this new best practice, wonderful, great. What are we going to stop doing? What are we going to take off so that we have the capacity to do this new initiative? That's a really important factor in developing high levels of trust.
Mr. Travis, what organizational restructuring is really needed within schools to support this greater success of teachers and therefore also students?
Yeah, well, it's distributing leadership down to the closest level. So, I think back my first principalship, I was a high school principal. I had 46 direct reports. There is a field of study called span of control theory. I prefer span of influence, but it was labeled span of control. And really what came out of that research is how effective are we as people managers to the number of people. So, and it looks a little bit different from industry to industry, but basically the research came down saying, no, most competent managers or supervisors can successfully manage and support 6 to 10 people, max. That's who I can support well. So if we then look at reorganizing schools, organizations where we are working in teams of no more than 6 or 10 people, what we find there's a collaboration that goes on. There's a level of depth of support that goes on. But when a school principal is expected to support to a deep level 46 people, No, that you're setting them up for failure. It doesn't work. It's not humanly possible. So that's the kind of work that I will do with schools and organizations, just looking at, okay, how can we distribute leadership down to make so decisions are being made to the closest level. This is what, working with districts. A lot of school districts, they make it very, very large. The one that I'm thinking of has like 73 campuses in the district, and they want to be equitable until they're rolling out some new initiative, wanting it to be equitable. So they kind of mandate it on all those campuses. Really a big mistake, because what we find is every school campus is unique. The demographics are unique. The needs are unique. So whatever that best practice is or whatever the initiative, it really has to be, again, contextualized and adapt to that setting. And when that decision is made in that local setting, far greater chance of getting buy-in, far greater chance of people actually owning it and following through. But when it's just dictated from above or from a district office, now largely what we found through the research is the larger an organization is, the more difficult it is to maintain high levels of trust, because those decisions are not being vetted at that close local level. And that goes right down to even organizing, again, a school or a business, looking at your divisions, your departments. Let's push those decisions down as close to the action as possible. And then we see high levels of trust grow out of that.
So with the basis of leadership that you're talking about, there has to be a set of highest priority be given to a group where their need becomes the most important priority for all to go, right? So for example, I'm assuming that the priority of the student needs are there the first, and then the ones who are delivering is the teachers, for example, and then the administrators. Does it feel like that it goes like the same thing with a business is the highest level of the service we get first to the priorities, the customers, and then the frontliners, and then it goes that way? Is that how the priority should be looked upon?
Absolutely not.
Okay.
And with all respect, that is the assumed approach of many, and that's really, again, where we stumble and fall. Now, in the education sector, if we're talking about student learning initiatives, and we're talking about, how learning is delivered, yes, and we're talking about the curriculum, student first. We're talking about, let's make sure we are meeting students' needs for their future, not our past. Absolutely. But when we're talking about managing the organization of a school, no, employees first every time, teachers first every time, because here's what we find and it was kind of what I was trying to say earlier, when teachers are well supported, engaged, given opportunity for development and growth, they are well supported. What we find is we then get highly engaged students. And so if teachers are happy, kids get happy. If kids get happy, parents are happy. And if parents are happy, then the administrators get to be happy at the end. But if you get that sequence out, you put the needs of kids or the wishes of parents above teachers, you've now created a very toxic work environment where teachers don't feel valued. They're valued. No, you're going to trump me with a parent's wish list every time, right? And same thing in the corporate setting. You have highly engaged and well-supported employees, they get innovative. We've seen innovation studies where, the happiest employees who aren't afraid to make mistakes are the most innovative. And they end up resulting in a higher return on the investment, if you will, for the company. It all comes down to high levels of trust, produces greater production or service, whatever that looks like. So no, always, when we're talking about organizational management, it's employees first.
This reminds me of some of the college professors that I was speaking with, and they said that due to some of the evaluative constructs that they've put in, that teachers or professors were now being evaluated based on how the students were writing about them. So for example, if they didn't get a good grade or something, they would go and write about the teacher, and then other students would go look. And it's almost like the professors then now had to babysit people's emotions versus really be true to what they were teaching. So this is part of what I'm also hearing from you, that The integrity of the teachers and the professors, they have to also be the utmost priority, or the workers, the frontliners, all of those have to be the priority, because those are the group that it funnels the education to the group, or the business values and the products to the group. So that's where the priority should really lie.
It's all about relationships, right?
Yeah.
It is all about the human resource.
So in 1 minute, if we haven't touched upon something that you really want everybody to know, what would that be?
Well, just to understand that trust obviously is the issue, and that there are resources and tools available to assess trust levels, to provide data, if you will, to guide improvement plans. That isn't a wish list. They're not just a bunch of soft skills. Again, we can assess it, we can build it, we can repair it if needed, and then we need to know how to maintain and protect it. But this is the primary work, especially that organizational and school leaders need to be involved in, because this is also where we find school improvement initiatives, organizational initiatives come through when schools and organizations focus on this priority.
Beautiful. Trust Ed, everyone. The Bridge to School Improvement is the book by Dr. Toby Travis. And where could they find you, Dr. Travis?
Well, the book is available on Amazon, and then they can find me at trustedconsulting.org or trustedschool.org.
Beautiful. Thank you so much for taking the time and being with us today.
My pleasure. Thank you.
And don't go anywhere. We'll be right back, everyone. Welcome back, everyone. I'm Dr. Foojan, and I'm excited to be with Suzanne Falter today. After losing her daughter, Teal, in 2012, Suzanne discovered the healing power of self-care. She now hosts the Self-Care for Extremely Busy Women podcast and is the author of multiple self-help titles, including Extremely Busy Woman's Guide to Self-Care. Her essays have appeared in different magazines, Self, More, Fitness, New Women, and the New York Times, and as well as O. Nice to have you with us today.
Thanks, Foojan. I appreciate being here.
Share with me and our audience about what changed your life dramatically into 2012 about your daughter.
Okay, so in 2012, the year began. I was a super stressed out, overtaxed, overachieving marketing consultant with a big business, and got really burned out and had to give the business up simultaneous with a relationship falling apart. And the home I had just moved into with that person, I had to move out. So I suddenly had no business and no home. And within a month of that time, or 2 months of that time, my 22-year-old daughter, Teal, who had come to live in the city that I was now living in, dropped dead from a medically unexplainable cardiac arrest. She died 6 days after collapsing from this cardiac arrest, right after I had dinner with her. And at that point, I thought already my life had unraveled, but that ground everything to a halt. I mean, it was like the bottom dropped out completely. And what it did, Foojan, was it made me reassess everything in my life that I had really not even paid attention to. I think I was coasting along, trying to get things done, being productive, trying to make money, trying to capitalize on success, trying to max the moment. And what I was actually doing was ignoring very fundamental values that I had. I was doing work that I didn't even like particularly, but I was good at, so I could make some money at it. I was allowing myself to be poorly treated in a relationship. And generally, I was pretty lost. So when Teal collapsed, it really forced me to do a massive reassessment of my life, because I knew, I walked into that hospital room and I looked at her stretched out on the bed, and there were all these machines and monitors all over her body. And I knew she would die. And I knew that I was going to be given this opportunity to reinvent myself and live my life in a way that she would be proud of me, that I had to really become a much better person than I was. And I was unsure how to do that. I just had to surrender to this process. So basically, I stopped working and I kept trying to go back to work. But after a loss like that, your mind is really literally disabled by grief, and you're unable to do much of anything. So because I was so lost, I think, I was able to kind of push a reset button and really begin to pay attention to what I really needed. In those first days, I remember a friend of mine said to me, "What do you need? What do you need right now?" And I didn't even know the answer to that question. I had radio silence, And because I didn't know the answer to the question, I was really confused about how to move forward with my life. But over time, as I allowed this grief to move through my life, and as I allowed myself to surrender, I began to really become better and better equipped to move forward. And it actually took me 2 years of not working and just living in a very small, quiet way. I ended up living in a friend's guest room for free and taking care of her dog and just having this life that was about extremely simple things. And I learned about self-care in that process. And a lot of it I learned from reading Teal's journals after her death, because she was a very different sort of person. She was very much focused on self-care for herself and on being the best person she could be, and on being really present, which was something I had no idea how to do.
It seems like you had gone through a kind of living life automatically, and then suddenly there was this huge shock that showed up to take you out of that automatic living and really exploring life, and meant to be living on every aspect, and to lose someone so important to you. I can imagine completely being devastated by grief. But also what grief does to us is allows us to question whys and how, and what is all this for, and the purpose of it, and what am I doing to myself and for myself, and how am I taking care of myself in order to be a useful human being for others. So I can see that it all really brought you into a place of how important it is to take care of yourself, and how important it was for Teal to take care of herself, to lose herself so young because of her physical body. So what are some of these self-care concepts that you have kind of come to see and experience for yourself out of all of this experience?
Well, the whole concept of self-care for extremely busy women is that we get too busy. We get so wound up doing, as you said, focusing on getting things done in an automatic way, that we have stopped paying attention to what we're actually doing and when we're doing it and why we're doing it. So one of the first things I really do suggest is that people slow down. And they slow down to the point where they can hear themselves think and feel, and they can begin to understand their own needs. By really focusing on your own needs, you allow yourself to know what it is that needs to happen. I really believe we're all wired from birth with a kind of a framework that tells us what our needs are. Little babies cry and they get their needs met. We are adults and we're so busy taking care of everybody else that we've lost that. But our instincts are still there, and they're still warning us and guiding us and leading us to really be present with ourselves. if we pay attention. So the first basic of self-care is to tune into yourself and to slow down. And sometimes that means you take a walk every day at lunch, or it might mean you meditate, or it might mean you do some breathing exercises, or it might mean you allow yourself to just do nothing for a little while. When's the last time any of us ever just did nothing? Well, I just did nothing yesterday, actually, but I've had to train myself to do nothing. And it sounds really counterproductive or counterintuitive, but the truth is, when you do begin to slow down and you begin to honor your needs and go within and really look at your own internal alignment and how that is being fed or starved, you begin to put pieces in place that actually make the rest of your life flow in a much more productive way. And, the second piece of this is to set better boundaries. Because one thing that was really true for me was I was trying to please everybody. I had no boundaries. I was being walked all over by certain people. And I was quietly resentful, but not saying anything. And for a lot of very busy women, it's kind of a, just sort of shut up and put up with it attitude. And when we actually say, well, no, I can't work past 5 o'clock. I really am going to need to go home now. And I will every day. People actually adjust to that, or you find a new job where it works. The bottom line is you have to reclaim your power. And a lot of my work is about helping busy women reclaim their power, because if you reclaim your power, then much more is possible. And part of this also is about learning to ask for help. So that, of course, was something I really didn't know how to do during that period. I was very ashamed of the degree to which I had fallen apart, and I didn't really want people to know, but I also really needed people to know, because the only way I was going to get through this was with other people like me who could help me. So I joined a grief support group. And I found a grief therapist, and I found some other types of support groups where people really were like me. And I began to, for the first time in my life, feel like I belonged somewhere. And sometimes we have no community around us. I didn't have any particular community. I had arrived in the Bay Area 2 years earlier, knowing nobody except a business partner. And I had to reinvent. And by reinventing and slowly rebuilding, the whole thing turned around and started to come back together. And what is great is I began to build a much healthier, more productive life. And, the fourth piece of this is once you get clear on what has to happen, you actually have to take action. It is okay to think about exercising or going for that meditative walk. But if we never do it, nothing changes. And if we are willing to get out of our comfort zone, things can change. And sometimes we have to ask for help. I mean, for me to get to the pool twice a week requires that I go swimming with my neighbor, Susan. She's got to show up and pick me up and I go, or vice versa. I pick her up. But if we don't do it together, I am not going swimming twice a week. I can tell you right now. So some of this is about setting up systems that will support your self-care. I have to have rewards for things like meditating 5 times a week. I mean, I wish I had more discipline or whatever, but I have to pay myself off with, a lovely hot fudge sundae or something if I really meet that goal. Yeah. We have to have systems in place that will help us. Maybe we ask our spouse to get the kids up and get them dressed and off in the morning, or we ask someone at work to cover for us every day so we can go take a walk at lunchtime. Whatever it is, there are ways to make this happen, because once you give yourself abundant self-care, what you're doing is you're nurturing your basic operating system, and it can flow so much more smoothly that things that you didn't think were possible become possible. And the over complexity and the overproduction, all that stuff starts to fade away. But you have to take control of the situation, and you have to get really clear on what the current reality is.
So when we're looking at busyness, It just seems like there's two layers. One, a person thinks that they have to because of their need. Another one is that they create a self-importance and that I have to do this because there's importance into me being there. So there's an importance in the identity that I've created, for example, that I have to be there. Obviously, for any reason, for example, losses, illnesses, a lot of different reasons where that, delusion is completely taken away from us, and we get it that no, the world does run without me being so busy and taking all of the, juggling all of that. And it's important for me to be able to kind of like calm down and then look at things from a different perspective versus just running around in the wheel, the rat wheel, and constantly thinking that that's all I got to do, and focusing on very small layer versus coming out of that the wheel and kind of looking at the bigger picture, and sometimes reevaluating and seeing maybe there was a time and a place and for all of this where I started, and is that even valid anymore? Do I even need this anymore after I gained that experience and I've been there, and maybe my need is something else. And I think that kind of slowing down, allowing ourselves to hear ourselves really, really matters for us to go. You talk a lot about women. How is this different than men? Since you emphasized on women, we also obviously have a lot of busy men. Some of these things also attributes to them, but I know there's an importance for you that you've talked about women.
I have to say, I just interviewed a guy on my own podcast about self-care for extremely busy men. And he was really talking to the point that I think is so very true, which is men are conditioned to believe they don't actually need self-care. A lot of women are too, but men are like, no to the self-care. That is weakness. That is something I will not need because, hey, I'm tough, I can take it. But that's not the point. The point is to honor yourself and nurture the systems you've been given to live this life with. And the reason I like to focus on women, first of all, being a woman, I understand women, but I also know that women become, part of the reason women become extremely busy is because they're filled with guilt and they're trying to live up to other people's expectations. And they're trying to meet a set of needs that other people are projecting on them. And often their mothers, a lot of the people who follow my work are mothers of small children or people caring for elders, people who just got a lot of responsibilities to begin with. And often they're talking about, I just have no time for XYZ. I'm completely strapped out. But what I see is often a lot of overproduction. Now, this is not something I see with men. I see this specifically with women. Women often feel they have to compensate for perhaps even just being a woman and over accomplish or overachieve to prove their worth in the marketplace, in the business place. And, do men have to do that to the same degree? I don't know. But it's worth asking a question. Are you overproducing? Are you the person who's afraid to go home on time because you won't get the raise or the promotion? When you actually notice the person who got the raise or promotion didn't even seem to be working that hard. It's like, I've been there and observed that. And the problem with being an overproducer is you exhaust yourself and you begin to burn out. And once you burned out, you're kind of no good use to anybody, least of all yourself. And you're often left with stress-related illnesses and just a generally unhappy way to live.
Very much. Actually, culturally, I think that traditionally, a lot of men who had to produce and overproduce, they did it in one area of life. And they thought that they would be married and their wife on a traditional level would be taking care of the rest of the stuff.
Right.
Women, I think that traditionally they had to manage everything of life and their husband or their mates or their children, and then obviously the next level started, which is also working in corporate world, and producing and creating, being partner in the finances also with their mates. So I think that women took much more balls in here, that they felt like it is my job to do. Where a lot of times for men, again, culturally, and we're not talking about every, obviously when we generalize, we're only generalizing, and it's not true for everyone. But there is this thing of, if I'm doing the other pieces, except the financial piece, if I'm doing any of the other pieces, I can drop them off. I can drop them at any point. I don't have to. This is like a favor that I'm doing. Where with women, it's not a favor that they're doing.
No.
It's almost like I got to juggle all these balls. And that's just the way it is. And it really, promotes kind of, it promotes that kind of overproductivity.
Yeah, I agree.
What is it that you are, what you talked about, a system that if people can set up, and I agree with you, I will not exercise unless I have a trainer or somebody that I got.
Somebody's expecting you to show up, right?
Exactly. So I really felt that. I'm like, yes, that's the way I am. But to me, that is the motivation. Like, if I understand what motivates me and I produce the system that it would motivate me, that's the whole concept of discipline anyway. The point is that each one of us, have a different desire. And if a part of me understands how to give that to myself, is the best. And how have you done the kind of a self-care in your own life for the past?
Well, I mean, what I recommend to people is to build a schedule. And it really, really feels uncomfortable and self-indulgent at first to have a self-care zone, or notice, book in a bunch of self-care activities, or go into your calendar and notice how much or how little self-care is in your schedule. And I mean, write it in your schedule. It isn't just like, at some point this afternoon, I will do yoga. It is at 3:30, I will do yoga. And I like, online calendars that have color-coded calendars that are specific to different subject matter. And I happen to have one for self-care. It is dark purple. And if I don't see enough dark purple on my calendar every week at a glance, I go in and add more. And, you want to have a balance of things. You want to be able to, you want to be able to have a little alone time scheduled, particularly if you have kids and small children. You will have kids clamoring over you every moment you could possibly be available. So if you don't carve out some time alone and a replacement for yourself, just, to be with your children, it will not happen. And actually, that's kind of a beautiful thing, because by being forced to be organized about it, you will make it happen. So then what do you do with your alone time? Do you go for a walk? Do you sit and look out the window? Do you go for a facial or a massage? Does it matter? No, it doesn't really matter, but it matters that you do it. And often people will think it's very silly to schedule time to be alone. I do not think it is. I think it's critical, because you've got to be able to hear yourself think. In the beginning of our interview, I talked about the need to hear what your needs are, and you can't hear them if there's too much static and interference and, other people's needs filling your airwaves.
And it's funny, because when I've tried to go, work 100 hours, and then at one point it's like, okay, I'm going on a vacation, and on a vacation, I just don't do anything. And it's interesting that it takes a couple of days before your system calms down to that kind of like, oh, it's a different time, it's like a Hawaii zone, it's a different time for my body to handle. And then coming back, you could see feel kind of the stress as it's being pushed to operate in that level again. And it sounds like a resistance, like, no, I don't want to operate in that mode again. And it's the time to really listen and look at what our body is telling us, and what your psyche is telling us, that what is the appropriate amount of that's busyness that our system requires, and at what age, because I think that different ages have different types of speed and excitement and motivation and, the energy level that goes. And I think I've noticed that as I've aged, my energy in doing a lot of things and reasons for doing those things have also changed completely. So
Right.
it's a constant reshuffling of where am I and what have I brought into my world, which is just no longer needed. I don't need it anymore, and I can restructure it and give it away or let it go, either let it go or just kind of give it away. And then what else has to come on my plate that satisfies me and matches my energy level in here? So definitely. Everyone, Suzanne Falter, the Extremely Busy Woman's Guide to Self-Care. Do less, achieve more, and live the life you want. In 1 minute or so that we have, anything we haven't touched upon that you really want everybody to know?
I would love it if people would drop by my Self-Care for Extremely Busy Women podcast, where I talk to all kinds of people who know a lot more about all different aspects of self-care than I do, because it turns out self-care is many, many things beyond just tuning in to yourself. It can also be what the balance of your work is, or what really lights you up in life. And I'm delighted to be able to be part of the self-care movement. So thank you for having me.
Beautiful. It was a joy to have you. Everyone, go get the book and go listen to the podcast, The Extremely Busy Woman Guide to Self-Care, Suzanne Falter. And for all of you who are out there, create an amazing life for yourself and everyone around you. And until next week, bye-bye.